So, hello and happy 420, everyone. Today we have with us Sparky Rose, a 10 plus veteran of the legal cannabis industry. He was awarded one of the first four dispensary licenses here in the US out in Oakland, California. He's developed cannabis brands such as Papa and Barkley, Sacred, Matter, and Grace Leaf. Sparky has consulted for PharmaCann, Harvest Health and Recreation, Haley's Hope, Flourish, and many more. Sparky, thank you for joining us today and sharing some of those insights with us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Happy 420.
Yes, indeed. So to start us off, what was the moment that kind of brought you into the cannabis industry? Did you wake up thinking like, I want to secure the bag. Let's go start selling weed and see how it goes from there?
No, it's really kind of long and complicated. I didn't make the decision to focus my career on cannabis till very recently, although I've been in the business now for close to 15 years. I accidentally got involved. I used to live in San Francisco, California, and I was a consultant in the internet space before the internet bubble burst. And after the bubble burst, while I was trying to find new work and no one was really hiring any internet strategists, I decided to join a punk rock band. I've been playing the drums since I was about 4 years old, and I was going stir crazy at home. So I was like, I need to do something. So I joined the band, and my bass player had lupus, and he heard me complaining about the job market. You know, you're sending out resumes, nothing's happening. And he said, hey, it doesn't pay much, but if you want to stand behind the counter and sell weed, I work at a cannabis club and I could get you a job there. And I had heard of cannabis clubs before. I had never been in one. I had been to Amsterdam, and I was like, what do I got to lose? It's something to do for a couple of weeks. I figured a couple of weeks, I get a job offer and I'm out of there. Long story short, 8 weeks later, I'm the executive director of Compassionate Caregivers. And we had two dispensaries and a cultivation center. We got a license in Oakland. We were already operating, but when they decided to start licensing companies, we won one of the first 4 licenses in Oakland. And then over the next 18 months, I expanded that to 7 dispensaries, 3 cultivation centers, doing about $5 million a month in revenue. And then I got arrested by the feds. I went to federal prison. I was in prison I was sentenced 37 months, served 22 inside and 6 in a halfway house. I got out of prison about 10 years ago, moved to Chicago about 9 years ago, went back to brand marketing, which is what I've done from the beginning. I've always been in branding and marketing. And I was working at Ogilvy and Mather, got out of there. And then I was hired as the chief marketing officer at PharmaCann. There was Sacred, there was Papa and Barkley, a couple brands I helped launch in between there. But long story short, I ended up where I am today. And it was when I decided to join PharmaCann that I decided, I think I'm just going to do this cannabis thing for good. And so that's what I got going on.
Wow. Quite the story there.
Yeah, it's fairly unique to me, but it's quite the story.
I'm intrigued. I hope there will be a book coming out one day. So having heard that, and then also me being the inquisitive type, did a lot of Googling prior to this conversation. I see that you've kind of been at the corporate level, you're kind of working at the ancillary level. And then I'm thinking come May, with the plant touching a little bit more one-on-one, when the new licenses are awarded in Illinois. Can you tell us a little bit about those skills that kind of helped you navigate those different levels of the cannabis industry?
So for my personal skill set, what I would say is coming from a brand marketing background is really important. So cannabis is fundamentally a consumer packaged goods industry. And so if you have any sort of brand or CPG experience, that's going to do you a lot of good in operating in cannabis. It requires a lot of focus, it requires a lot of discipline, and it requires a somewhat insane focus on the customer. That's really what the industry is all about. And if you're not focusing on the customer and the consumer experience, you're missing the boat and you're going to have a lot of problems. While I was in the internet space, I worked for a large consultancy in San Francisco called Viant. And our largest client was Robert Half International, which is the largest specialized staffing company in the world. And I was hired away from Viant to RHI as their head of e-business initiatives. And so learning the staffing business was a huge help for me, because one of the, particularly on the dispensary side of the cannabis equation, staffing a retail dispensary is like staffing any retail location, and it's very difficult to keep well staffed. Keep them trained up, keep them, on staff, because typically those sort of retail positions go to younger individuals. They're typically not as high as paying. I mean, cannabis as a whole probably pays their retail workers a lot more than any other retail space, but still, the level of people you tend to get people who are a little more transient with their careers or have other obligations that may rise in their mind to a level that's a little bit more important than perhaps servicing your customers. So keeping a strong retail staff is a challenge, and it's something that will always be part of a dispensary owner's day to day. And so I'd say those are the things that really made the difference for me, and I think helped me be very successful in the space so far.
Okay. So follow-up question to that. So say someone that's, kind of completely outside of like brand retail, a teacher perhaps, how could they level some of those skills to be able to kind of transition into the industry?
So the thing to remember about the cannabis industry is that it's just like any other industry. And that means that whatever you do, chances are there's a job for you doing the same thing that you do now in cannabis. They need HR people. They need, IT people. They need all the same people that every other company needs in the back office to keep the day-to-day running. And then obviously there is some specialization, growers of cannabis obviously know how to grow the plant, how to work with the plant, et cetera. So there is some specialized stuff, but for all intent and purpose, if you have a job, chances are you can get a similar job in staffing. I mean, staffing, I'm thinking of staffing in cannabis. But let's go with the example you gave, like a teacher. Education is a huge deal in cannabis because, and this is coming from someone in brand marketing, typically in regulated states, there are limits to what you can do as far as marketing goes. There's not going to be any television ads on your local news program, touting a dispensary or the latest vapes that came out. So one thing that you can do almost with impunity is put out messages that are educational to the public or sponsor educational programs. And so it's a great brand building exercise to use education to get your message out. So actually a teacher would be probably a very good help to the marketing team. Also, just the training and the writing of SOPs, so standard operating procedures, for those people who aren't aware, are integral to the successful operation of a dispensary business or any cannabis business for all intent and purpose, because compliance is such a big deal in the industry. Having well-written, well-thought-out, and updated standard operating procedures for everything you do is very important. And people who have an educational background, a technical writing background, et cetera, can be really helpful in getting those done right out of the gate. And it's kind of something you have to do at the very beginning of organizing your company, because these are going to be sort of like the holy grail documents that everybody after you uses in order to implement your business the way you want it implemented. And it's extremely crucial if you have your sights set on owning a large cannabis company. If you want to have, hey, I've just always wanted to have a dispensary, I just want to have my one little dispensary in Chicago or wherever, probably not as critical, but still highly recommend it. But if you're like, hey, I want to be a multi-state operator one day, I want to own 10, 20 dispensaries, they are critical to your success, because it's something that everybody can always reference and instantly understand, this is how I'm supposed to handle this situation while remaining compliant with the law. Because compliance, I can't stress the importance in the cannabis space. It is your blood, it is your life. If you're not compliant, you lose your license and you're done for good.
So another thing, I'm a millennial. So as I'm going through, a job search, a process or anything like that, they usually want you to have like 12 degrees and, 30 years of experience, to do said job. Are you seeing those types of similar trends in the cannabis industry?
So it's real interesting what's happening in cannabis. And it really depends on what level position you're talking about. If you're talking about a patient care representative or a bud tender or a frontline retail position, obviously they're not looking for people with degrees or any such thing. And as a matter of fact, I would also caution anybody in the dispensary space not to hire based on their knowledge of cannabis, because that is really the least important thing for a retail hire out of everything that you have to consider. You want someone that's reliable, you want someone that's personable, and you want someone that's empathetic, someone who can connect with the consumer and who can have a pleasant discussion. I can teach you everything you need to know about cannabis. I can't teach you not to be a jerk. And if you're inherently a jerk, that's not going to help me no matter how much you know about cannabis. So on those, on sort of your lesser skill positions, it's probably more about character than it is about competence. When you start talking about higher level positions, management positions, and otherwise, number one, although it's getting better, it's still really hard to find lots of people with lots of cannabis experience. I mean, the industry has only been around for yay long. The legal cannabis industry, ostensibly started in 1996 with the passage of Proposition 215 in California, but really didn't get rolling until Colorado passed adult use, and that was like, oh, okay, now we can really talk about multi-state operators and things like that. So with all those things happening, what you've now found is in the higher level positions, let's say chief marketing officer, marketing manager, I'm sticking with the marketing stuff because it's easy off the top of my head, but any of those higher end positions, even human resources, et cetera, C-suite, chief operating officer, there are so many people in regular industries who really want to jump on the cannabis train that you find executives from, giant alcohol corporations like Diageo and Bacardi, and folks from Pepsi, and folks from Apple, all willing to take huge pay cuts to get in the cannabis space. And so they're bringing all their huge amounts of expertise outside of cannabis and using that to kind of get in because they can afford not to take so much money. They'll take stock, which is what they really want anyway, because they see this as a path to riches. But yeah, you're finding a lot of extremely qualified folks as far as the sort of the general subject matter of what they do for a career. You're finding them taking big pay cuts to come into cannabis, or they were before. Now the stock market's kind of been devastated with the cannabis stock's been devastated. They're probably a little less eager to jump ship, but it was a problem before, because if you were someone very skilled with cannabis experience, you were getting some very, 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 very senior people coming from very well-known companies that you just can't possibly compete with the name recognition, especially when they're publicly traded. And so that press release of, hey, so-and-so chief marketing officer at Apple has left and has come to this company versus Sparky Rose, felon, but with a lot of cannabis experience, it reads better if it's the dude from Apple. So yeah, there's a lot of that going on. But yeah, the key to getting in is, I think, understanding the industry, gaining understanding of how it works. And really showing that you understand what it is that you do, and going in honest and say, hey, I don't know everything there is to know cannabis. I don't know a whole lot about cannabis, but I've got a voracious appetite for learning. And here's the things that I have been doing. You can go to places like Green Flower, where they have excellent online education courses, et cetera. But there's lots of online resources. Bone up as much as you can. And really, people hire people, and I hire people more than I hire qualifications at the end of the day. But yeah, that's really all you can do. And networking, obviously, and there's some great networking opportunities here in Illinois.
All right. Thank you for that. So switching gears a little bit, May is only a few weeks away. And those that applied for those first round of dispensary license will know whether or not, they'll be one of the happy 75 or, part of the try again crew. And maybe even some, what, this isn't my ministry, this isn't my hustle. It was a great experience, I'm going to opt out. So kind of knowing that, these weeks are coming ahead, assuming that, the pandemic isn't, putting too many barriers in place, what are some of the things that those that are going to be awarded the license should be thinking about to roll out their new business?
Well, there's a lot. So obviously, we're talking about dispensaries specifically, as those are what will be awarded on May 1st. Things to think about. Well, the first thing is going to be location, because unlike when it was medical, where you had to apply with a location established, in order to make it easier for folks as part of the social equity program, you didn't have to do that. And so upon winning the license, then you have, I believe it's 90 days to go find your location. And that's going to be a little bit tricky amid the pandemic if you don't already have that done. But yeah, and you really can't do a whole lot in advance unless you're maybe going downstate. If you're going for one of the 47 licenses in the Chicagoland area, you still won't know until after the license is awarded where you're allowed to set up shop, because they're going to have that sort of lottery system, to figure out where people go. And so you just kind of got to wait. But yeah, so you want to definitely start thinking about location to the degree you can. Other things that are important are if you don't have an accountant that is well versed in 280E, you want to get that right out of the gate, because that can definitely impact how you structure your organization and how you structure your company in order to try to diminish the effect of 280E taxing on your business. So that's extremely important. I would definitely do that out of the gate if you haven't already done that. Start looking at IT. I don't think people really understand how important information technology is in the cannabis space, particularly around staying compliant. So if you don't have an IT vendor, if you haven't started selecting what you're going to be using for your POS software, perhaps your ERP software, et cetera, I would start looking into that sooner rather than later. You're going to need banking. So banking for cannabis companies is very difficult and very, very expensive. I set up banking for Supercritical, which is my consulting firm. We don't touch the plant. We just help people out, help them write their applications. We help people raise money. We're still considered a marijuana related business. It took me 6 weeks to start up a bank account, and it was extremely expensive. So you want to start that immediately. Find banking. It's going to take you a minute. I mean, that's like the top 3 things that I would do. We can talk about starting on your SOPs, building out your standard operating procedures. We can talk about supply chain. So, you're going to need to sell cannabis products. And while rest assured, as soon as the list of licensees is published, you'll probably start getting contacted by the local cultivators that currently exist about, hey, will you carry our products? But since we know supply is going to be constrained, I would be as proactive as possible on that and go to networking events, get to know people at those companies and say, hey, I think I might want to carry your products, and try to secure yourself a spot to get products from those folks. I mean, you can start thinking about consumer experience. Obviously, for dispensaries, it's a big deal. And amid this pandemic, do you need to be looking for a larger facility? I mean, do you want to make social distancing in your dispensary part of the norm from here on out? Hey, I just want to make sure I have a big enough space where people can stay 6 feet apart. The dispensary that I go to locally, I will not give them a plug here just because it's probably not appropriate, but it's wonderful. But it's quite a small space. And so it's really hard to create any distance. I mean, it's pretty packed in there. And so it'll be interesting to see how do people look at this pandemic, and how does it actually change dispensary design? I would certainly consider a larger space, and maybe even building out how the checkout and so forth works to where there's some degree of safeguards, whether it's the big face screens or whatnot, or at least make it easy to install those for when sort of flu season happens. There's a lot of things to think through and how this is going to affect day-to-day life. And so I think wherever there are issues or wherever there have been problems, that's always opportunity. And so how do I look at this pandemic or the societal changes that are having as a result of the pandemic? How do I turn that into an opportunity for me to either differentiate myself, further delight my consumer, et cetera, et cetera? And so those are the things I think that I would do out of the gate if I learned that I want a license.
Okay. And so
hire a consultant.
Oh yeah.
I know a good one.
I was like, I do now too. So as a short follow-up to that, there are going to be some disappointed people. I may actually be one of those people because I also applied for the dispensing round. But there's knowledge in the process. And, if people are, managing their expectations, especially if you have, $2,500 to $5,000, if you are not awarded a license, how can you leverage that process of going through it to either, you know, enter the cannabis space as just, you know, a standalone career, whether it's with, you know, corporate or ancillary, or, you know, go into reapplying for the next round that comes about?
I mean, I'd say when it comes to entering the marketplace, you don't really have to do anything. You having gone through the licensing process, and I'm assuming that you were very hands-on, that you either helped author or at least most certainly read through each and every exhibit that you submitted. But if you helped write it, chances are you've read the CRTA so many times, it's just going to drive you crazy. I mean, I can kind of recite it in my sleep. And so having that much knowledge about the law and about what it is to be compliant, what you can and can't do, et cetera, that's a huge leg up in any position you may want to apply for here in Illinois. Hey, I know the regulations like the back of my hand. I know exactly how those regulations pertain to the type of position that I'm applying for. Let me count the ways, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that, I mean, any operator in this state or any state for that matter, you come in and you're able to practically quote, you know, the law and the legislation, I'm going to take a hard look at you, because again, compliance and remaining compliant is so unbelievably important in this business. It's almost as important as having capital. That if I know that I have someone, hey, who's going to do job A, but also can be a resource to make sure that the people around them also remain compliant. When there's a question about compliance and what do we do, and I know that this person is really knowledgeable, that's gravy. That's what you want, you know. You want compliance evangelists within your organization, reminding everybody how important it is to be compliant, making sure people stay compliant. And so I think that if you've gone through the process, you're way better off already. You don't really have to do anything, just go start talking to folks. If you lost and you want to reapply, you can hire a consultant. But if that's not a thing, you may look at some of the existing, you know, many of the existing cultivators here in Illinois are running incubator programs. I think everyone's familiar with Cresco because this was really big. I think they had 30 cohorts or something the first time around. I assume they're going to do subsequent round of cohorts for follow-on rounds, that this wasn't just a one-time thing. So I would definitely look at latching on to one of those. There's Growmentum is an organization here in Illinois, and they are doing sort of a free incubator of sorts. They're for, as it was explained to me, they're for people who do not, for whatever reason, either philosophically or financially, do not want to pay outside consultants, which can be quite expensive, but really want to do it on your own. They were holding, you know, every weekend a free session. You could come in and they would help you get through the application process. So they would be another good resource. But yeah, so you might look to hook up with a group like an incubator. The areas of your application where you can really improve, I think, because specific to dispensaries, they've reduced the barrier of entry so far because of social equity, that there's really only a couple places where you can really stand out. And because there's no location involved, because that used to be a big deal as to where is it going to be, now that that's no longer the case, you're looking at, hey, what's the experience on your team? So if you don't have a lot of cannabis experience, or if you maybe haven't done such a very good job of explaining why the experience on your team can be applied to the cannabis industry. Because, you know, if you have someone who's been working in the alcohol space or the pharmaceutical space, those are highly regulated industries. So there's a lot of transfer of, again, around how many times I say it during this interview, compliance. And that's really what's important to the state, is security, keeping it out of the hands of children, remaining compliant with the law. Those are way more important than just about anything else, safety and security. And so you may want to do your best to find some other more experienced folks, again, through networking. You might be able to peel some folks off of some of the established players, PharmaCann, Cresco. They'll probably see that. They won't be too mad at me. Anyway, you might find some folks who want to be a little more entrepreneurial, and they might, you know, there's other experience out there. And so you may want to bone up on experience. And then the other one really is community engagement. So how are you going to give back to the community? That's huge. There can be a lot of money made in this space. Illinois is rather unique because we're a limited licensure adult use state. It's very unique. And so because there's a limited number of licenses, that means there's a limited supply, which means the cost of cannabis in Illinois is going to remain artificially high for the foreseeable future. Because until there's a lot more supply, there's no really reason for the price to go down. I mean, we're selling out of everything that's made in this state right now. We're just sold out. And so I don't think we're gonna get ourselves out of that hole anytime soon. And I'll give you some comparative figures in just a second. But that being the case, companies in Illinois will be profitable and they will make healthy margins. And I think it's your responsibility as a business owner, and I think as someone in cannabis, that you have to demonstrate how you're going to turn that into a positive into your community. And so the more you can build out, and it's a little tricky because you don't know what your community is going to be, because you don't know where you're going to locate, but just think more broadly, things you can do with, hey, here's X percent of our projected profits that we're willing to put back to the community. It's easy to say, hey, here's some organizations, we're going to give them the money, but isn't there more that you can do? Can you and your team help other people who want to get into the business? Hey, we'll hold free seminars to train people. We'll run you through our training program, even though we're not hiring right now. I mean, there's lots of things I think that you can do that will have a positive impact as a result of the positive of the profits you're going to make off of this industry. And I think it's vitally important to your success that you enumerate that as well as you can in the application process.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Sparky. I have enjoyed our time together. I learned a lot for myself even. And I'm sure, our viewers can take a lot of what you've offered today and kind of run with it and hopefully, start their own ventures.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me. Always a pleasure. Happy to support Chicago NORML. And Super Critical is my agency for consulting, and 4042 North is for brand marketing and cannabis. If you need any help, give us a call. Happy to chat you up. Happy 420, everybody. Thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you, and have a good one.